Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the platform. My name is Maria, and I'm the founder of Social Justice Insights Kenya. First of all, Happy New Year's, everyone. Thanks for sticking on with us this long. It's been an amazing journey of the podcast, the platform, everything. Almost at 1K followers on Instagram. So make sure you follow us there. And remember to subscribe on here. But today is a special, special day because we have Cylcia Manwa, and she is a Kenyan-British who is the youngest elected councillor in the United Kingdom. So her story is amazing for me and for us because, first of all, she's an amazing advocate for women, girls, ethnic minorities, and youth in politics. But her story is also a story that shows that you can limit leadership. You can limit leadership when it comes to age, when it comes to gender. And I love that her story is a really powerful example of this. So, Cylcia, welcome. And we're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm equally as excited to be on the podcast. So I'm excited for this episode.
Super, super amazing. Wait, is that right? You're Kenyan British? Yeah, Kenyan British.
Yes, it is. It
Yeah,
is.
so she's one of us, guys. So you know this is legit.
Yes.
So
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I'd love to hear like your journey from politics at a young age. There was the mention that you used to debate with your parents about politics. How did that interest come about?
Well, for me, I think it's really started from home. And I think it's something that a lot of you guys can probably relate to, in that your dad having like CNN or Al Jazeera or just news on in the home 24/7. And I think because of that, I was always exposed to what was going on in the world. I was very up to date with current affairs, and that would spark really, really lively discussions and debates between me and my dad and my family just in general. And I think that really, really helped to shape my worldview and open my eyes to not only what's going on in my area or within my vicinity, but what's going on in the world internationally, on a global level. And I think that very much helped kind of lay the foundations for what would go on to eventually be a political sort of career. But that was definitely, I think, the earliest memories of my kind of political awareness, I think.
You went from debating with your parents and then you decided to run. How did that happen? Like, what was the background that went into that?
Yeah, because that it seems like a major jump, I think. But I think it was a combination of quite a few different factors. So, of course, that definitely shaped my worldview, my politics, and my sense of justice, which is very important to me. I think also what was relevant was I helped campaign for a lady named Bukio Kunade. She was a councillor in my town. And in my teen years, I would go out and help her campaign. So that was one of my first ways in which I was exposed to local politics and campaigning, door knocking, canvassing, which is really the bread and butter of local politics, of local government, and especially in the sense of being party political, because I joined the Labour Party from quite a young age. And so I was doing that for a few years. And eventually, she'd been a councillor for about 11 years, Bukio Kunade, and she lost the election. But a few years ago, and she was like, Cece, I really think you should consider to stand when you turn 18, because at this point I was around 17. And on top of this, I was a a member of youth cabinet in my local borough. So for a few years, I was interacting with the council quite consistently, sitting on employment panels when they were interviewing the directors of services for, let's say, children's services. I would sit as one of the people who was on that interviewing panel. I went and I discussed with other young people in my borough about the issues and the concerns that we think are most relevant to the children and young people of Thurrock. So I think combining all of those different things, being a school prefect in my primary school days, all of that I think fed into me wanting to eventually stand. But there was never a grand sort of plan that this is where I would end up, because I think for me, like a lot of people, younger or older, there's a lot of mystification around what the council actually does. and the
Mhm.
role of local government as opposed to the national or central government in Westminster. But I think through all of these journeys and experiences which I had up until the point of 17 years old, I think that really empowered me to take that step and put myself forward to stand.
So I see that you've taken the steps of like just doing what your heart tells you to do. And I think that's very empowering because a lot of people think like you have to have everything mapped out, which I don't know, it's very difficult to do that because you can't have
Yeah.
the perfect handbook or perfect steps as to how life goes. So amazing lesson learned there. And so you won. Fast forward, you won the Thurrock Council elections in 2023 and you beat your opponents by 35 votes. And I want everyone to keep in mind that this is a predominantly white constituency, right? So this is like you're the youngest and then you're
Yeah.
black. You can like how did that make you feel? What was the reaction of people around you?
I think my reaction, my actual reaction of when we were in the election hall was shock. I think when I first was told that you've won, um, yeah, I was excited. I can't really explain that feeling because I knew that me and my family, my friends, and the Labour Party, we all worked really hard in my ward because it was a target seat. It was a swing seat. So it was a seat that we needed to win off of, an opposing party. So we knew that it was going to be an uphill battle from the beginning. And so even when we were in the election hall and they were doing the count and we're watching the count as all the candidates do, it was really close. And people in the beginning, I've never actually said this before, but when we were watching over the count, already some people were trying to come to me and be like, "Look, Cece, if you don't," people trying to already kind of prepare me for the outcome of, you
Mm.
might not win this and that's okay, trying to give me the pre commiseration, which was all well meaning. It was really well, just because from looking at the votes, it was just so close. So when I heard that, no, you actually won, I don't know, it was a really euphoric feeling. And yeah, it took a minute to really set in that had happened. But I did have the faith that I could do it. And I knew that we'd worked very, very hard.
I actually can't imagine that. You know, people are consoling you like you're gonna fail. Pure joy, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Actually, you studied or you just
Yeah.
recently graduated, by the way. Congratulations from LSE. So what fed into your decision
Thank
to
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
welcome. So what fed into your decision to study politics and international relations? Did that make it more difficult to do school and also work on the council, or did it also feed into some of the policies and activities that you endorsed at the council?
I think good because I did choose my degree before I had even really decided to stand for election. So I mean, it's quite unsurprising. I've always just found this area of study particularly interesting. And so when I decided to stand whilst I was in my first year of university, it definitely made my experience of university quite different from the average or typical one, just because I was stretched so thin in terms of, you're studying at university, going to your lectures, your seminars, your classes, your deadlines, your essays. And then I'm rushing back and forth to go attend council meetings, committee meetings, and my responsibilities as a locally elected representative. I think it wasn't easy, I'll put it that way. But if I'm honest, I think I thrive when I have a lot of things going on. And I find that the busier that I am, the easier it is for me to organize my time purely based on the fact that I don't have enough time to begin with. So I kind of have to be very efficient with how I spend my time, what I'm doing. So it was a very unique experience. It was challenging, but if I'm honest, I don't think I would want to have experienced my university journey going any other way.
I can imagine the up and down and the way there's a bunch of essays when you're doing your bachelor's. It's actually insane. Seminars, like you're a superhero. And I would
Yeah,
literally, I'd really
it's a
love to know.
lot.
Yeah, I really love to know how you survived, but you made it, and we're so proud of you. What I would really love to know, like, what are some of the activities or people-centered solutions that you worked on during your time at the council? Also, maybe you can run us through what being a council member really is. what they really do.
So, in terms of what a councillor is, they're a locally elected representative. They're comparable to a member of parliament in the UK context, only that it's a much, much smaller area which you are responsible for. And that area is known as a ward. A ward is just a smaller version of a constituency, essentially. And it's your job as a councillor to represent the views and interests of the people living in your ward and to advocate on their behalf. And this is through a variety of mechanisms. It can be through full council meetings, which we have once every few months, where we vote through motions and we discuss agenda items that are concerning all residents in the borough. It can also be through committee meetings, which are specific groups and meetings which we have around different service areas that we have in the council. So for me, I sit on committees to do with adult health and social care. I sit on committees to do with the audit of the council's finances and other things. I sit on committees to do with, it's called the Place Committee, but essentially it's a committee that looks at the systems and services which the council offers in respects to looking after the environment. So whether that's to do with housing or it's to do with a big agenda item with that committee is housing. I think that's more or less the main thing. And the social housing, which the council is responsible for. So there really is a range of activities and mechanisms and functions within local government. But all of it sort of ties into delivering for local people. A lot of what the council does is the stuff that people don't often realize. It's the things that you don't even really think about, but from the bins being collected at the right time, to the grass being cut before it gets too high, to making sure that services, roads, and infrastructure are, being maintained. Um, there's a lot of things that go on with that. So for me personally, things that I've done as a councillor, a lot of my work has been through advocating for my residents in committee meetings, bringing up issues such as damp and mold in certain social housing stock. It's been to do with highlighting the fact that my ward has a high level of childhood obesity. What are we doing as a council to combat that? How are we interacting with schools? Um, you know, there's an upcoming piece of work which I should be doing on a ferry service that was recently suspended, which has had a really detrimental impact on local people. So we're
Mhm.
going to be having a task and finish group, which is essentially a short term intensive course or investigation into a specific issue, which in this case is the closure of the ferry. So we get up to a lot as councillors. We hold surgeries where we speak to residents one on one. We go into our ward, we pick up casework. I could really go on and list a lot of the things that I do and we're expected to do as councillors. But yeah, that's a kind of brief overview.
Yeah. Okay, for the listeners, in a nutshell, what she does is basically the equivalent of an MCA role in Kenya. So they can relate a bit more, a member of county assembly. So basically what
Yeah.
she does is what our MCAs are supposed to do. Whether they do it is a story for another day. So it's amazing to see that you're actually going into action, that you're on the ground, you're doing everything that needs to be done to ensure that daily living is actually sustainable for people. People don't realize that mold is
Yeah.
actually a really big issue in the UK. Children die from mold in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I
Yeah.
had to learn by reading and learning about it there as well. So you're working on very impactful projects. Has there ever been a time when your youth or your gender has been questioned or challenged, especially because you were also pursuing your bachelor's degree at the same time, and people might think, oh, you need to go to school to be doing this work?
Well, I think first, in terms of the point of school, it's always very interesting because I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that there is into barriers of entry into politics. Of course, statistically, if you look at the majority of, let's say, members of parliament, the majority of them have gone to university. But there are also quite a few members of parliament who have not gone to university. And it's a similar story in local government. Actually, in local government, I would say it's more so a lot of people there, a lot of fellow councillors, they have not gone to university or pursued higher education. that's not a prerequisite to entering local government. And I think that is what I think stops maybe quite a few people from wanting to take that step in putting themselves forward to be elected, because there's this fear of I'm not qualified enough. But especially in the context of local government, what really qualifies you is your experience of life at whatever stage that is. That is valid, and that will help improve decision making processes in the council. You don't need to have a specific degree. You don't need to have reached a specific age. I think all of that are just ways in which we as young people are, as underrepresented groups already in democracy, this is how we're kept out of these spaces. These are the misconceptions and the lies, frankly, that I'm really passionate at trying to dispel. I think for me, being a counsellor and having that educational background, it certainly helps. Um, but it's by no means like a prerequisite or necessary to doing this work. Um, and yeah, could you remind me, sorry, of the first part of that question?
Has there been an instance where your youth or your gender has been questioned during your role as a
Uh,
counselor?
Yes, I would say a lot of that was before I was elected. It was during the campaign, especially on social media, on Facebook. Unfortunately, I've
Oh,
not found that to be the kindest place when it comes, especially to local politics. But yeah, that was a big talking point. I received quite a few derogatory comments, about my age, about the fact that the Labour Party are crazy for choosing such a young candidate. She's never gonna win. Well, what does she know about politics? She's just come out of nappies. That was one of the comments which I saw, which I actually found quite funny. But I think some of these things you do have to take it with a bit of humor. Otherwise, you'll go crazy if you internalize a lot of this stuff. I would definitely say that, especially my age, was a big talking point, and that's the thing I was asked about the most throughout my campaign. But I've always been someone to say that I don't think age has a correlation, or it doesn't determine competency at all. There is not a link between the two things. You can find an older person who will be really great at doing a job in the same way that you could find an older person who might not be particularly suited for that role, and vice versa with young people. I think that our life experience, at whatever stage that is valid and informs better decision making process. And that's something that I've always gone on about, because it's something I genuinely believe. And I think if we really want a healthy, functioning democracy, there must be a wide representation of voices and people sat around the table when we are scrutinizing policy, formulating it, and eventually now enforcing that and implementing that into our communities.
yes. Ah, I love that so much because a lot of young people think that they cannot do the things that they want to do because they're just young. Like I have to be like 28 or 30 or something to be able to do this sort of thing. I think we should actually just step out of
Yeah.
that and the need to have degrees to do certain jobs. Actually, now I'm seeing a progression in jobs not having a degree requirement, but rather experience. And you already had that experience because you
Yeah.
were helping with campaigns before. So technically, you had the work experience. I love that. And I would love to see other places and companies endorsing that, especially in Kenya, where a lot of young people don't have the opportunities to do
Yeah.
such things like this. You also spoke about some of the harassment you got online. I'm so sorry for that, first of all. My audience, you know that the technology facilitated gender-based violence, as we talked about in episode 1, is very common and was the theme of the 16 days of activism last year. So I urge you guys to take it very seriously when you see someone being bullied, to call it out, because trust me, that person is not just doing it to the one person, they're doing it to everyone else. And it's very sad that women in politics are the biggest victims of this, especially women in politics and in journalism. Now, you've been in high level places. You met the king, you've been in the Commonwealth, you've been at 10 Downing Street. Like, how did these how did these instances like boost your confidence and alter your sense of belonging as a young woman in politics? Did it make you feel like, yes, like I feel like I belong here, or did you already just have that confidence?
I think going into those rooms, the biggest thing that and meeting these people, what it's really shown me is that they're all actually human beings at the end of the day, if I'm honest. I think going into it, of course, there's a lot of pride I think that you have in yourself when you've reached certain levels in your career. And it's a lot of gratitude and it feels surreal, like walking into Buckingham Palace, meeting the king, going into 10 Downing Street, meeting the prime minister and all these sorts of different things. But I think what it really does show you though, when you actually interact with these people, you see them on the TV and the newspapers. These are some of the most high profile figures in the country. And you have a conversation with them and you realize these are human beings as well. They're not as scary as you might think. Um, it's not as intimidating really. But I think part of the reason why I'm able to think like that is just because I know that titles and going into high level places, of course, all these things are important. They help your career. They give you a sense of legitimacy and belonging in certain spaces. But your confidence really has to come from within. It cannot come from external accolades and accreditations. And I say all of that fully well knowing and agreeing with the fact that those things do matter, especially in a professional context. Being recognized for your work is, of course, something you're going to want and be grateful for, and it can definitely open doors for you. But when it's all said and done, all of those things are external. What really stays with you is your sense of purpose internally and you knowing that you are enough, irrespective of the invites you receive or you don't receive. So I think that's been something I've always kept that in mind. And I think that's really helped me. So when I have met senior politicians and public figures, I'm able to just kind of be myself in that way. And I think that just helps to ground you, because I think it's very important to stay grounded, especially when you are in this sort of line of work. And I'm blessed with so many opportunities. It's important to also remember who I am outside of all of this.
Yes, it's true. It has to come from within. The external validation is constant when you're shooting up, but then when it's a plateau phase and it stops, then you start feeling
Yeah,
bad and you're like, oh my gosh, am I not doing the right thing? When in real sense, you're still making an impact. It's
yeah.
just that you're choosing not to see it because no one is like clapping on social media or anything. And so you've gone from local to international advocacy and leadership. What what have you learned the most when it comes to the possibility to enforce systemic change? How possible does this seem for you?
I think it seems increasingly possible. And I think through going to these international forums, the most recent one being in Geneva, Switzerland, I was actually it was held at the Red Cross. We got to visit the UN, which
Nice.
was really cool. See the flags and everything. But I think in that conference in specifically, it was relating to interfaith dialogue and the importance of fostering social cohesion in European cities. Um, and it brought together people from, of course, all different faiths, and we sat down and we spoke about the issues that we are facing across Europe. To do with anti-migrant rhetoric, to do with climate degradation. I think that attending that conference specifically, it really gave me a renewed sense of purpose and action, because right now there's a lot going on in the UK domestically, there's so much going on internationally, and so many communities feel so fragmented and atomized. So it's important to take the learnings from these international conferences and see what ways I can apply them to my local context. Because something which I learned at a summer boot camp, which I attended in Sicily, in the south of Italy, in September, um, something we really taught was an anti-racism and discrimination boot camp. And one of the things we were told was to think globally but act locally. And that has really stuck in my head, because I think especially in today's interconnected world through social media, we are more connected than ever. We know what's going on, thousands and thousands of miles away. It's important to be informed about what's going on, but also what can we do locally to help improve our community and our situation. It can't be one or the other. I think the two feed into each other, and it's only through that mechanism that we can bring about the change that we want to see. So I think going to these international conferences, it gives a lot of food for thought, but it also actually allows me to come back to my local context in my responsibility as a local elected representative and see, okay, what can I see? What can I try and apply here? Um, and see what kind of impact that has for my community.
Amazing. So, a few of my audience members are young women trying to get into the international politics and law fields, and they really wanted to know what are the key skills that someone needs to excel in this field.
Interpersonal communication skills are essential. I think it's very important when you are looking for these sorts of opportunities to be sure of what it is that you're passionate about and what you bring to a conversation. I think it's about networking, really, about finding any and every opportunity which you can, even if it doesn't seem directly related to the end goal which you are pursuing. If it has any sort of relevancy, I really recommend just putting yourself forward and going for it, because you can meet people in the most unlikely of places, but it's only if you're open and you put yourself in the position to be able to receive those opportunities that you're going to get them. At the end of the day, for me personally, I'm fortunate that I've been to several of these sorts of meetings, and hopefully I'll go to more in the future. But this wasn't something that I was doing, let's say, 5 years ago. As I've explained in my story, this all started locally. My work still is intertwined and ingrained in the grassroots level. And I think, of course, we want to be in these prestigious high level rooms and meetings, but it's also important to recognize that that doesn't happen overnight. And it's important that you really build a foundation in a cause or something that you are passionate about at the beginning, so that when you actually get into these rooms, you have something valuable and tangible to bring. Um, that's going to be the ticket, I think, that gets you in that door. It's in these international sort of spaces, especially like on social media and all these things, it can glorify these accomplishments. And I think it's also important to just have a wider perspective as to what we're supposed to be doing in these spaces and what we're supposed to be doing outside of these spaces as well. Because it's all well and good to go and attend like a high level meeting, but if you come out of that and you're not really feeling like there's much you can implement or do in your own personal capacity, then after a while, you become disillusioned. So, yeah. But my advice would be, yeah, to be confident, put yourself out there, take any and every opportunity which you can if it's related to where you're trying to end up. And make sure that you're bringing something of value and of interest to the table in whatever subject matter or issue, humanitarian issue that you're engaged in or with.
Exactly, exactly. And I tell people this all the time. Just do something that you love on the side, even if you have a 9 to 5, just do it and build your dream on the side, and your 9 to 5 can like feed into it.
Yeah.
So I love that they've heard it from you too. So very important.
Yeah.
And we're coming to a close. And gosh, we are wondering, what do you do in your free time? Do you have free time? And what do you do during your free time? Because I know juggling like all these responsibilities could be difficult. And you're 21. We don't want people to think like, guys, she's like a zombie. She works in parliament. No, because I know like, you're a very wholesome person. So I'd love to know, what do you do in your free time?
Thank you. For me, I spend a lot of time with my family and my friends. I love traveling. I spent a lot of last year and previous years traveling. I love visiting different countries in my free time. And I'm lucky enough that because I've been doing work in this international advocacy diplomacy space, the travel comes with the work. So I'm very blessed that I get to do that. I think I recently, last night actually, I was painting. I love art. I like to paint. That's a hobby of mine. I like to read. Reading is something that I've been doing a lot more recently, and reading becomes a lot more enjoyable when you are not studying for your undergraduate degree, where you already have to read like God knows how many papers. So now I'm out of that. I've just been going back into my love of reading. Yeah, painting, going on walks, spending time with my family, friends, traveling. I really make an intentional effort to have quite a balanced sort of life and actually have a life outside of party politics and like my job, because otherwise it can get very overwhelming. And especially in today's politically volatile climate, there's a lot going on. And if you don't take the time to unplug and to really be present in yourself and nurture your own interests that fall outside of this realm, um, it can really take a toll on your mental health, and it can be quite depressing. So I think it's been very important to me to just have a really fulfilling life outside of what I do. I feel like having that downtime really feeds into me being able to push even harder in my work and to fight harder for the causes that I believe in and for the values which I think are important, of having empathy and compassion for the most marginalized people in our society, and making sure that we're delivering for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what is amazing is that the previous guests I had as well, she talked about self-care and she's an activist. She talked about the importance of self-care in activism. And
Yes.
I just love people seeing that trend, because life is not all about work. Don't let work kill you. Don't let your mission kill you as well, your passion. Find things that you love on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
love to see that. So thank you
Have
so much for coming. And now we're coming to a close. And I'd love to know, if you read a headline about yourself 10 years from now, what would you like it to say?
That is such a good question, and it's one I I've thought about it. I'm thinking about it, and I think if I had to give myself a headline, hopefully it would be that Cylcia Manwa um has built a successful career in advocating on behalf of the most marginalized in society, and I hope that that headline would put me in some position of leadership and stewardship over an agency or a area that really gets to the heart of advocating for marginalized people. Um, I think I'd want that. That's a very long headline. That's not what a headline would be, but I hope it would read somewhat along the lines. Maybe
Yeah.
that would be the blurb or the subtitle. Maybe that's the subheading. But
Yeah, we see the vision. We see the vision. It could like be, yeah, the heading and the small. Yeah, amazing. And we'll be back 10 years from now to follow up. So thank you so much for coming on today. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Cylcia Manwa. As you see, her story is amazing, and I truly hope that it has inspired you, but also changed how you think about women in positions of power or women in politics, and also get to see the behind the scenes of what goes on, especially when it comes to online harassment and the day-to-day life when it comes to self-care and the qualities that feed into such a career. Thank you so much, Cylcia. Nice to see you again. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Stay informed and stay empowered.